Congratulations, you've just found the #1 over 50 health and wellness podcast on the planet. Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm a healthy aging expert and the founder of The Silver Edge, and I am on a mission to help men and women just like you build lean, strong, healthy, capable bodies they love for the rest of their lives. All right, folks, let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt like your brain just isn't keeping up? Maybe you deal with headaches, brain fog, or that constant low-grade fatigue that makes you feel like you're running on empty. Or maybe you've even battled migraines and know firsthand just how brutal they can be. Here's the good news. Today's guest knows exactly what that's like, and she's turned her own pain into groundbreaking research that's helping thousands reclaim their brain power. I'm talking about Dr. Elena Gross. She's a neuroscientist who spent years fighting chronic migraines before discovering the powerful link between brain health, metabolism, and nutrition. She's been published in journals like Nature Neurology. She's the holder of multiple patents, and her story is nothing short of inspiring. So, if you want to learn how to fuel your brain, boost your energy, and age with more mojo than ever before, stick around. You're going to love this conversation. So whip up your protein smoothies and let's meet Elena.
I was always interested kind of in the science and the arts, at least as a student. And then later on, really, when I watched some university lectures that were geared at students or at children, they had these like a demo lecture. Sorry, you can cut that out. I was looking for the word. I really fell in love with psychology first and the brain as the organ that makes us who we are. So then for a while, I wanted to study psychology, and that's actually also my first degree. As really something that sits between the arts and the sciences, and what does the brain do and how does it work was really fascinating to me. And then I developed migraines. So I really developed them when I was around 14 years of age. And they were quite episodic at first. So they were really debilitating, but not as frequent. But despite trying everything there was on the pharma and alternative side of things, it only kept getting worse. And then towards the end of halfway through my psychology degree, I actually had chronic migraines, being in pain over 50% of the time. 20 days of pain in the brain or around the brain you really can't ignore. And so I knew I would never be a psychotherapist, or I would never do a normal job. I wouldn't be able to. So I decided, okay, I'm going to dedicate my life to research and better understanding what the problem of migraine is. And I was lucky enough to be accepted then in a neuroscience degree, and did some research on migraine, and later on also a PhD. And what I stumbled across then really enabled me to help myself with migraine. But the more I learned in the PhD and thereafter is actually migraine and a lot of neuropsychiatric diseases or subgroups of these diseases actually have a huge thing in common. And when you address that, brain function improves, and as a result, migraine can get better, but also a lot of other things can improve. And since I discovered that, I just never left the field. There's so much to discover. There's so much hope you can spread, knowledge you can spread, and so much you can do by changing the environment so your genes are not expressing as negatively, that I founded a startup, launched a product, and I'm still in the whole neuropsychiatric metabolism space to date.
Neuropsychiatric metabolism. Yeah, I love it. All right. So, but I want to back up a little bit. So at age 14, you started having migraines, and you mentioned that, I guess, by your late teens, early 20s, then it was debilitating. I think you mentioned in there 20 days and a month of migraines. Yeah.
It was always a slope. Like I tried everything. I was like not drinking wine. I skipped all this food stuff. I wasn't going to the parties. I missed half of the fun at like half of my school towards the later stages, right? And I was doing everything right, as they say, and it wasn't rewarded at all. So that just tells you that what they tell you need to do might not be the best advice for everyone, right? So,
okay. So I'm curious, how do you describe your state now? Are you cured? Are you in remission? What does that look like? Let's start there.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I believe, the migraine genetics that cause or contribute to the disease, the pain, they are actually something that has been evolutionarily preserved for 10,000 of years, right? I still have those genetics. And they come with the disadvantage, if you want to call it that, of getting that pain frequently if you don't listen. But they come with a lot of advantages too, like a high performance brain, perfectionism, good or bad. So the genetics that give you migraine, I still have them. But my environment is now optimally, or at least much more optimally adapted to my genetics. So the question always is, do you have the disease? Are you cured if you still have the genetics? I'm not cured of migraine. I can still get them, but I'm lucky that I can still get them, because migraine, in my opinion, is a warning sign. And to you listening that don't have migraine, pain is always a warning signal. Even if you have chronic pain, right? It's telling you that something is off and that you need to change something. So the pain is the fire alarm, not the fire. And in modern medicine, we try to always turn off the annoying fire alarm, the pain, instead of actually looking for the fire or the causes of the fire. Now, the migraine is evolutionary adaptageous. It's telling you that something is off. For example, that there's not enough energy in the brain, or there's too much oxidative stress, which is harmful. We can go into that later on. But really important to understand is you don't want to completely eradicate migraine, because it's the warning signal. So today, if I don't sleep enough, I don't get deep sleep, and I'm overworked, and then I have some wine, or I'm jet lagged, right? I still get a migraine because my brain's like, look, you're not listening. You have to rest. Now I'm forcing you to rest. So I still get those, maybe once a month, maybe every 2 months, really infrequently. But when I do, I know I've done something wrong, or there's some free iron in my supplements that I didn't realize, or there's some kind of a trigger, or I'm overdosing a supplement. It's always warning me, and then I need to figure out what's going on. So I still get the warning. I still have the same genetics, but I'm not debilitating by it anymore. Not by any means. I can now really use it as a tool, as a listen to the signal and change accordingly.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of yeah,
For sure.
a bunch in there I want to unpack. I mean, I remember I've been doing this podcast for 5.5 years now. One of my very first guests was this guy. He was, I don't know, 55 years old, and he won the CrossFit Games in his age division. So a super athlete, and I was at CrossFit I probably wasn't even a coach then. I was probably just a CrossFit guy at the time. And I was really excited to interview him. And he said something very interesting. He said, at that peak performance, your body whispers to you, and you have to be able to listen and interpret to what it says. And it sounds to me like what you're saying is sometimes if you don't listen to that whisper, it turns into a yell, it turns into a scream, right? And so there's, to your point.
That's a migraine.
Yeah, and that's a migraine.
100%. I love that. And to be honest, today, in this day and age, we're trained so much to not listen to our body signals anymore, right? We have to multitask, we have to work, we have to take care of our children, like all at the same time, right? And next to it, the TV's running, and then there's another call or some music, and there's constant stimulation. And the brain has to kind of deal with all of that at the same. It barely gets any rest. We're not encouraged for rest. It's not cool to sleep, and at some point, it just has to scream, and nobody listens to the subtle cues anymore. And then if you turn to diets, we turn to, because our diet is so highly processed and is kind of like exploiting our neurochemistry to turn towards addiction. Nobody can really know what they need from a nutrition perspective either. So we've kind of completely lost touch to what we need and to the signals, the whisper of the body, that maybe you need some more protein, or you need some more of that, or you need some rest, some sleep, you maybe need some sunlight, maybe you need a hug, or some connection, right? But I think today we just sit there and we're like, oh, I'm miserable. But why? I don't feel well, but who can really describe as in what they might be lacking? So that's such a beautiful sentence that, yeah, if you want to perform your best, if you just want to be well, right, you have to listen to your body, and you have to relearn to be able to hear those signals. And the last thing I want to say there, where we can learn this, if we look to young babies, young children, they're 100% in tune with what they eat.
Yeah.
They will very selectively pick the cheese from the bread or lick off the butter from the bread. If they need fat, they will only eat the vegetable. They will not eat the broccoli if the anti-nutrients are too strong for them, or for whatever the reason they might be allergic. They will know, as long as they haven't been exposed to modern foods, they will know what they need. They will sleep when they need to sleep, So I think it's a beautiful thing to watch, that babies and small children still have that tuition that we need to learn to bring back in our lives. And then, yeah, what I always hear, it sounds daunting. No, I mean, everybody needs to work, live, and perfection isn't needed, right? I'd rather have imperfect action on all of these things than perfect inaction. So
Yeah,
Um,
100% with you on that. Yeah, I love it. So, yeah, I agree that in our modern society, our modern culture, we are so disconnected from our physical bodies. We don't have that sacred relationship with our physicality and with the way we fuel that and what we surround it with. And like you said, with the necessity for rest. And I feel like for a lot of us that
bodies and mind.
bodies
I
and
think
mind, 100%. We are disconnected. Yes, point well taken, bodies and minds. And I feel like those of us that aren't in that, 5-stage alarm, I have migraines, a lot of us are in that mid space where we have chronic inflammation and we just kind of feel crappy or tired. And that's our baseline. And we don't realize what else is available to us until maybe you've had some sort of a lifestyle change and you go, oh, so this is what feeling optimal feels like, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And a lot of the symptoms are nowadays also normalized in the sense that, oh, but you're like, whatever, like you're now 35 or you're 40 and
Yep.
it's normal to be
Yep.
tired and it's
Yep.
normal to have this, what, and that. And it's maybe normal, but
Sure.
normal doesn't mean optimal, right?
Right.
So we really have to turn away from normal because everyone's so sick that
Yes.
normal doesn't mean anything anymore,
Right.
right?
Yeah. We don't want
And
normal. This audience listening to this is not chasing normal, right? That in fact
normal,
they're running
exactly.
away from that, right?
And
Sadly.
everything is a continuum, right? And so you have optimal metabolic and brain health on the one end, and then you have really like chronic migraines, Alzheimer's disease, whatever on the other side. But it's a continuum, and that's
It
something
is.
that modern medicine is not catering for either. Modern medicine is two boxes. Either you're healthy or you're sick.
Right.
But it's really a continuum. And so you can be anywhere on that spectrum between perfect mental and physical and metabolic and brain health, whatever, and like really having a chronic, very severe disease. But you can be in the middle. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing something, right? Just because you don't have that one tick that you would need to fall into the disease category yet.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought that up. And for those that are in the middle, the good news is you can start early, and it's way easier to get things changed before you've been like in decades of chronic disease, when there's still hope, for sure. I don't want to discourage anyone, right? But
Right.
it's always, the longer you've been sick, the harder it is to kind of like try to undo and get back to a healthy baseline.
100%. Modern medicine, modern doctors, like you said, that's a beautiful illustration. There's two boxes, right? You're either sick or quote unquote healthy. And to the doctor, you being not sick means healthy. Your doctor's not helping you chase optimum performance, optimum health, optimum anything, really. They just want you to be quote unquote not sick. And if you are sick, then well,
Define sick
here's the
means like
surgery,
you're
here's
not
the
in the category of disease that we already have defined.
right.
Because sadly, there's so many problems nowadays that don't have a category of a disease yet. And then you're deemed healthy as well, and you're super sick. For example, long COVID, all of this stuff like chronic fatigue syndrome, all these mitochondrial issues that are creeping up, that haven't been studied, that haven't been around, that don't fall into like a diagnosis that's been around for a couple of decades. Those people are also considered healthy, even
Right.
though they can hardly bed, right? So yeah, so define sick, that's the other problem. You're only sick if you meet some of those criteria that somebody has thought up a couple of decades ago,
Couple of
right?
decades ago. Yeah, 100%. All right, Elena, I want to go back to the whole genetic, epigenetic, because you had mentioned, hey, I still have this genetic predisposition for, in your case, migraines. Can you talk to us a little bit? Well, let's back up. What is the primary cause of migraines? Is there one? And is that genetic or why, for example, my wife occasionally gets migraines. Knock on wood, I've never had one. Is the difference environmental? Is it genetic? Is it both? What does the role of genetics play in those that get migraines versus those that perhaps don't?
An excellent question. And maybe we need to quickly discuss genetic and epigenetics, just what it means. Genetic is basically the building blocks or the manual for the building blocks of your cells, your enzyme, your proteins, whatever that makes you, right? So that's the manual. Epigenetics is which parts of the manual can actually be read, which pages are stuck together, which pages are magnified, and like read super well, which might be like read not so well, just occasionally. That's epigenetics. And epigenetics is basically your environment. Earlier we said we call this the gene environment interaction. Now, some genes have a very strong, or some traits have a very strong environmental factor, and some genes have an almost purely genetic factor, and environment plays a very, very little role. And this was determined already decades ago using identical twins. So this is what we also learned in psychology, and how much of a trait is dependent mostly on environment and how much mostly on genes. An example would be height. So your height is predominantly genetic, meaning 90% of the time you will reach a certain height. You will not reach the height if you're severely protein restricted, growing up in a poor area in Africa, for example. Then your genes will not determine your height, but it's rare. Religion, for example, or which social party you adhere to, is on the other hand 90% environmental, because your genes there play a very little role. It's more your upbringing, your environment that really determines that kind of a trait, right? Now, in migraine, it's very important to know, if you look at a disease, there are single genetic diseases like Duchenne muscular dystrophy. One gene is mutated. You cannot build a certain protein. These poor children die before they're 30 because they cannot build muscle. At some point, they can't breathe and they die. One deletion, almost 100% genetic. With your diet, with whatever, you can prolong the life a little bit. But really, this is primarily like height, right? 90% genetic, 10% environment, right? This, you're doomed, more or less. Now, migraine and other civilization diseases like Alzheimer's, depression, all of these, they have different polymorphisms, meaning just different versions of certain genes that are fairly common, not very, very seldom, and just one mutation, accumulating together, many, many different variants of genes together in the right environment, or the wrong environment, if you want to call it so, leading to the disease. Now, there are three very rare forms of like monogenetic migraine, hemiplegic migraine, where again, there's like one thing mutated, and then you're almost certain to get the disease. But for common migraine, the migraine that you mentioned on your wife, that I had, that most people are dealing with, it is certainly a mix of environment, strong mix of environment and genetics. So if you're born with those genes, your environment largely determines, are you getting that migraine or not? And this, we don't 100% know how much is that mix. Yeah. It's between 90 and 10, right? We don't know. It's probably more like 50-50, but you can't do these experiments very well, right? So in migraine, it's interesting that it's 3-to-1 male-female, female-male, when people have reached puberty. So before puberty, it's 1-to-1. And once, so for children, and after puberty, it's heavily shifted towards women. So hormones do play a role. But what is the cause of migraine? Now, in more simple terms, what we have published is that migraine genetics kind of do two things. So for one, we know that migraine patients have a fast, hyperexcitable brain. So it's not habituating, meaning if you were to look at a white wall that doesn't change, at some point your brain will stop firing because nothing is changing, to conserve energy, right? A migraine's brain will continue to fire, even though the stimulus isn't changing. Now, again, I always try to look at things from an evolutionary perspective. Why would it be advantageous that every 7th person has that hyperexcitability genetic? Right? Every 7th person is how many migraine patients are out there. Maybe even more have those genetics, but it didn't express. But let's say every 7, a billion people in the world. If you go back 10,000 plus years, right, and we were living in tribes, lying around the campfire at night, every 7th person had a hyperexcitable, energy-demanding brain. So if the tiger is coming, those are probably likely the ones that are waking up everybody and saving the tribe from the tiger. Now, I don't know if that's true for your wife, but she might have a light sleep. She might be somewhat sensitive with regards to sensory input and all of that, right? So in today's world, not advantageous, right? I can only sleep if there's like no noise and everything is dark, you know. But here we go. So we have an hyperexcitable, energy-demanding brain, which needs to be fed. Now, you put that high-demand, energy-demanding brain into today's world, and migraines also oftentimes don't come with perfect glucose metabolism. and they don't come with perfect antioxidant defense, meaning they can't neutralize those free radical bombs that are produced when we live, eat, when we're stressed, when we ingest chemicals, and so on. So it's the perfect storm. You have less energy availability because you can't use glucose so much, and like sugar is what our modern brains are mostly using for energy. You have micronutrient deficiencies, which means inefficient energy production in today's world where everything is depleted, even if we eat healthily. You have increased toxins and oxidative stress and so on, which migraineurs can't deal with very well. Plus, they have this increased energy demand. So in migraine patients, you find even between attacks, 16% less energy in the brain. That's massive.
Yeah.
1/6. And that's even between attacks. And this is not even in the worst cases, right? So we have an increased demand matched with a decrease in supply. And that's the perfect storm, which then turns on the cascade of like pain causing molecules and rescue situation in the brain. And yeah, if you fix the energy situation, which is what my research and my company is focused on, right? If you provide a cleaner, more efficient energy source for the brain, micronutrients, antioxidants, and so on, you can, in some patients, really mitigate the issue. And that can be beneficial for other neuropsychiatric diseases as well, where the root is more the energy deficiency rather than other causes.
Okay, this is fascinating. I want to pull this apart a little bit because there's a bunch of things in here I want to unpack. So we know that the brain is, help me out if I get this wrong here, but I think I've heard it stated that the brain is like 2% of your overall body composition, but yet it requires 20% of your body's fuel or energy, right? Is that close? Oh, 20 to 25. Okay. So, but the idea here is that we have a pretty small sized organ using a extraordinary amount of energy. And you've just said that, hey, part of the problem here with migraine being this basically fire alarm that something is wrong is this energy mismatch. So let's pull this apart a little bit because I know, certainly we have beat this to death on this podcast in the past, right? We talk all the time about nutrition and avoiding highly processed foods and eating real whole foods. That's just the base. Everybody can do that regardless of where you're starting from, right? But we're still, if we live in those of us that live in, say, urban environments, we're still in trouble, right? Because our soil doesn't have the same minerals that it had in our grandparents' time, or certainly going back 10,000 years in our hunter, So evolutionarily, our brains and our bodies have evolved to expect a certain type of energy. And then very rapidly, like in the last 50 years, we have dramatically changed that food and nutrient environment. So talk a little bit about those of us that are like, especially those that may be experiencing any kind of chronic pain or any kind of chronic condition at all based on our environment, what's our best hope for, or let me back up. How can we best address this through nutrition, or can we? Is it really a fact that I just don't need to eat more broccoli? I need help from supplements or something else?
Yeah, this is an excellent question and so practical. And I was for like 2 decades, I thought, even if I buy my food at Aldi or like a cheap supermarket, as long as I eat real food, I'm going to be good. There's two flaws to that. First, you already mentioned, right? What is not in the soil is not going to end up in your food.
Or in your
What
body.
isn't in the grass is not going to end up in the meat that you're eating, right? So where you get your food varies tremendously. Not even that. So today we transported banana across half of the planet.
Right.
It may turn yellow if it's adequately treated, but then we think that that banana has the same amount of micronutrients and nutrients that it would have on the other end of the world, where it was harvested unripe and then with some kind of chemical processing on the way kind of was forced to ripen artificially. That has a fraction of the nutrients that we think a banana has in the end, right? So this is one thing. There's so much more to this. There was a recent study, and this shocked me so much. If you have a locally grown, organically grown, in the garden grown tomato, and you compare that to a tomato, not organic, comes from wherever in the world, that artificial standard tomato has about 1 milligram of iron in it. If you want to cover your iron needs with that tomato, right, you have to eat 1,000 of them.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
The locally homegrown tomato, whatever, had over 1,000 milligram. in there. It's still not well absorbed iron, right? But it was a
Mm-hmm.
thousandfold just for the iron, right? So I don't know this for all of the vegetables and fruits, and this is, of course, it will vary a lot. But it just tells you, right, eating locally and organically will improve things drastically, and still you don't know what's in that soil, because you can name a food or declare a food organic depending on which organization is giving the label, between 3 and 5 years after completely destroying the soil with like monocrop
Right.
agriculture, right? 3 to 5 years is no time to actually restore the soil and get rid of all the pesticide, herbicides, heavy metals, whatever that's in the soil. So that's one aspect, like what's available. And now you already said, if you are already chronically sick, and this is the other problem, if you're sick, you have inflammation, your demand goes up drastically to the person that's healthy, that may get by with way less. So it's a different advice if I'm talking to the fit athlete that is now listening, who's doing well, who's eating whole foods, who can run around and is performing excellent, right? He's probably covered, right? Versus the struggling, already chronically sick person that is trying to get everything it needs from whole food, right? Because the demand is higher. So everybody has a different demand and baseline. Plus, somebody already sick, you'll have issues coming in like leaky gut, inflammation in the gut. So suddenly your absorption of the already diminished nutrients is much decreased. So even less gets into the body, have a higher demand, and then you might have some allergies that make things even worse. And then a lot of ingredients or nutrients that come from plants are actually not human identical, which means they need to be converted in the body to the active form using enzymes and energy.
Yep.
Now, that might well work to a good degree in a healthy person, but somebody's already on the way to chronic sickness may neither have adequate enzyme power or energy to do that. So then you're in another problem. And lastly, when it comes to the brain, we need to understand that the brain metabolism is quite different to the rest of the body, in the sense that the brain, as you said, it's the most energy hungry organ in the body, but it's also very well protected. So for one, it has a skull, so it can't store energy very well at all, which is why a stroke, in a couple of minutes, brain cells die. There's no backup storage. There's no space. Second, it's surrounded by the blood-brain barrier, apart from in the nose, right? Which is to keep invaders out, bacteria, and so on. Very useful to protect it. Also means only 3 fuel sources, small molecules, can get actually in the brain to feed it properly. And like a heart or a muscle can use big chain fatty acids, protein, whatever, right? The brain cannot. It's very specific. Can't store, and it has a blood-brain barrier, so it needs to be provided by the rest of the body with adequate energy at all times. So it's very much dependent on the rest of the body and us eating the right things to fuel it. So what can we do, right? This is the question now. And this is also why in the end, packaging is changing. Why I made this is to kind of circumnavigate all of these problems by giving first a very clean fuel source for the brain in the form of ketone bodies, as well as 35 micronutrients, antioxidants, and so on in their bioactive form, in the form that can be used by a sick body, like ready to go, and spares the liver. Because the liver is actually the organ next to the brain that is often struggling in a lot of chronically sick patients. Medication overuse, detoxifying stuff that's around, clearing inflammation, whatever it is. So this kind of, in a way, bypasses the liver by having the metabolically active versions. Do you need to buy that product? Probably not. But if you can afford it, we don't know. Nobody knows what's in the soil. So either, if you can't do testing, have a very broad band formulation that covers you, especially, as you said, like water in the US, right?
Yeah.
It's a disaster.
It is.
Now we have at least understood we need to filter the water to get the bad stuff out. But then you're left with dead water that doesn't have any, and if you're lucky, they put a few electrolytes in it so it tastes better. But there's no trace minerals in there. There's none of the little stuff that is so, like all enzymes in the body almost work either with electrolytes or with trace elements as cofactors. Manganese, chromium, selenium, if you don't have them, then everything breaks down, right? So either you test, ideally in full blood regularly, where you have gaps, and then you supplement very targeted and specifically on what you are lacking. And if you can't do that, I recommend a broad spend broadband, bioavailable, bioactive version of multivitamins to anybody who doesn't feel well, and just see how they feel. Watch out for iron. So this doesn't have iron and copper in it because that's something that's very pro-oxidative. And this is also something that you can have too much of or too little of, right? So that's nothing you want to just give out to people. This can also trigger migraine. So these are the pro-oxidative minerals that you want to be careful with. So that's why they're not in there. So that's also important to know for anybody. Watch out for these two. And those we need to be really taken separately and seeing if they're causing you issues. But otherwise, yeah, especially if you're sick and you suspect that you may not get adequate nutrient level in certain domains, testing or supplementing blindly and seeing if you feel better would be my recommendation. Yeah.
Isn't it crazy the times we live in? As we're having this conversation, especially, look, I'm a nutrition nerd. You're a big time nutrition nerd, right? You got a PhD in neurobrains, chemistry, science, all of that. And yet even you and I struggle in this area, right? So, and it makes me think, what about the common person? Because we know here in the US, 70% of us are now overweight or obese, and most of us have at least one chronic condition in my age demographic here. And you would think that, some simple advice like eat real whole food, which everybody should do, to be clear, that's where we should start, but it's not enough, is it? I mean,
no, the problem is, look, I was struggling with this because I always try to go the whole foods, healthy, natural way. But we have been messed up with chemicals, with herbicides, pesticides, with toxins that we may not even know the name of. In the last 50 years, I think 80,000 new substances have hit the planet. We cannot expect something natural to completely undo all the natural, unnatural stuff that is happening around us, right? So if we're bombarded with chemicals and toxins and whatever, we cannot expect just eating healthy to be enough for everyone.
Yeah.
I think that's where we get it wrong. So if we were living 10,000 plus years back, or even if we just were living 500 years ago, eating a healthy diet, unless you get hit by an aggressive virus or whatever, or a bacterial infection or something that is acute and out of the ordinary, we would have been fine. If we put a baby born today in like a countryside setting with clean water and whole foods, and we shield it from toxins and processed foods, it will probably grow up perfectly healthy and fine. Give it some love as well, of course, right? The problem is we're not infants on a clean slate.
Right.
So what is fine for a human freshly born is different than to somebody being exposed to all this shit and being really sick for 40 plus years. So what is good for a human in the healthy state is different, probably different. I mean, I can't say this in like whole terms, probably different to what somebody needs to do who's already pretty sick and already downstream to a lot of unhealthy, toxic stuff that we also need to take care of. So I think this is where the discrepancy lies between trying to expect just a natural thing to completely undo all the stuff that has happened over decades. Might not be good enough for everyone.
Right. It's
for some,
crazy, absolutely crazy. And
it's crazy. It's crazy, and it's very sad. And I don't know where this is going to go. I'm the canary in the coal mine. So I had heavy metal poisoning. I was bedridden for a year. That's the stories that few people know. I had migraine, but I also had chronic fatigue, mitochondrial dysfunction. My mitochondria are still suffering. I was full of lead to the brink, and I was eating healthy, halfway organic even, right? I had heavy metal scores that are through the roof. I couldn't move for a year until I really did detoxification and all sorts of other stuff, and even like blood cleaning, which is so crazy and shocking, right? That some of us that have bad detox genetics and antioxidant genes may not just be fine with eliminating exposure after they're already down the hill, right? So it's sad, but it's true. And I think not knowing it may in the long run not protect us, right? So it's better to know what we're up against, and at least then we can try to do something about it. But yeah. We're no longer in a space where we can just say, eat whole foods and you're good.
No, I agree. Yeah. So we, and look, to be clear, again, everybody should be moving their bodies. You should have a strength training practice. You should have a walking practice.
I want to interject. No, because it's also a trigger. I mean, yes, if you can move your body, you should. But sometimes there are patients out there, even chronic fatigue, mitochondrial function, that need to restore energy first.
Before that, that's a good point. Well taken. There is a percentage of people, right?
moving.
Yeah.
Listen to your body. You might not even be in a place where you can do a lot of movement while not harming yourself, right? Because then exercise is oxidative stress.
Right. It's
This is a
it's a
stressor.
energy demand. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, in the right doses makes you grow.
Right.
If you're outside of what it's called your hormetic window, which is your window of growth, if that's too much, then you will degrade. So you will make things worse. So that's the number one thing that people need to understand and listen to the whisper is, again, how big is my hormetic window? Hormesis is basically the terms of growth. There's mitohormesis, which is the energy growth, right? You always want to stay in that window where you don't harm yourself. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. What kills you doesn't make you stronger, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
in general, moving is good for everybody who can, right? And
Right.
sometimes you have to advance and be like, okay, before I start moving more, I need to get the energy up, the micronutrients. If you are severely magnesium deficient or manganese, or you don't have the enzymes or the energy, then pushing your body too hard will just do the opposite, right? So yeah.
Makes sense.
Within reason, yes, and nothing is for everyone, apart from maybe the whole foods aspect.
Whole foods, clean water. Yeah. Sleep. There's a few things that are foundational, I think, across the board. Yeah.
But sleep, I mean, I don't tell people they need to sleep 6 hours, 8 hours anymore, because there are people that need less. And I mean, they're sometimes the fittest, yeah, right? They have probably 2 hours of deep sleep in that 6 hours, but they're fine and rested and fresh to go and have way more energy than me after 8 hours. So who am I to tell them that everybody needs 8 hours, right? And everybody needs to fast. I think you need to get enough sleep for your body type, right? And enough movement for your body type, adequate amounts of water for your body type and electrolytes or whatever that is. But I didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to say movement, if it feels good, yes.
Yeah. So it has to be the correct dose.
Yeah,
and for
exactly.
all of us as bio individuals, that's going to be different. The amount of exercise, purposeful exercise and sports I do would be grossly inappropriate for somebody who didn't have, say, the mitochondrial health that I'm blessed with. So that's, I guess, another way of saying it. I want to go back to
They might get there.
No, we would hope they would get there, and they should, in fact, work to get there. I 100% with you on that. Yep. But I want to go back to the environmental toxins, because you had mentioned just briefly that these things are hiding everywhere, and there's like 80,000 new chemicals in the last couple of decades here. But I think a lot of us are missing the fact that these are hiding in plain sight. They're the things in your bathroom. They're in your kitchen cupboards. They're in your laundry room. They're, of course, in all of the food packaging that we get.
In your perfume.
Oh my goodness. Anything that has, perfume, anything that's labeled that has fragrance, all these endocrine disruptors. I really like the app EWG, so Environmental Working Group.org has an app, and you can just scan pretty much any commercial product, your shampoo, your deodorant, your soap, your perfumes, your makeups, all these things, and it'll give you a red, yellow, green light, and that's a really good place to start. Yeah, great place to start, because your home should be your fortress, and you want to do everything you can to fortify that for optimal health. And certainly if you're slathering up with all of these lotions and creams and soaps and shampoos that are just laden with parabens and fragrances and toxic crap, you're just fighting an uphill battle. It's going to be hard for you to have optimal health with just that constant load of microtoxins. So I just wanted to kind of point that out to folks. Know that it's not just the quote unquote air pollution or the bad water supply, although those are certainly issues. It's also just in your home, your cleaning supplies, your hygiene supplies. So take a look at cleaning that up.
I love that so much that you mentioned that. And actually, I would even go this far for myself, because I know I'm a bad detoxing person. I try to, with a couple of exceptions, not put anything on my skin what I wouldn't put on my tongue.
Same.
Yeah. This is where you can double check, like, would you eat that or not?
Right.
And if the answer is no, right, for shampoo, it can be hard, right? But the shampoo you don't have to really rub that into your scalp, right? You can also just leave it on the hair. The hair doesn't absorb so much. But on other things, I mean, you can make your own deodorant, or you can just use sodium bicarbonate, right, as a deodorant that works perfectly well. I try to make my own lotion when I can, but there's organic options out there. Perfume is the new smoking.
Yeah.
Perfumes, 50% of perfumes contain so many toxins. And the bad thing about these odorants is as I said earlier, the nose is the only place where the blood-brain barrier is broken because otherwise you couldn't smell. So if you want toxins directly to find their way into your brain, you breathe them in, right? And so anything that has a strong smell, and you'll see like detergents and all this stuff, right? It's really bad for you. And I promise you, once you get rid of that stuff and switch it out for essential oils, for example, you also will get much more sensitive. So now if somebody else has a lot of perfume, I get physically sick almost, right? Because it's you're
Yes, you
desensitizing
do.
yourself. And
Yeah.
you smell your food will taste better because now you're like, oh my God, this is the different nuances of a tomato or whatever, right? So it's really worth it. Start today, look at the labels, kick it out, and get the clean stuff. Because this is really, if you don't get the foundation right, which is in your home, as you said, right? You can forget about the other stuff. And toxins, I want to include one more source of toxins. Too much physical exercise also makes oxidative stress, like chemical toxins, but also psychological stress is very similar to chemical stress in your body. So this is especially true for perfectionist migraineurs, but somebody else might resonate. You can't say no, right? You have this friend since childhood who is actually really just toxic and not fun to be around, but you were always friends, just because you were friends in kindergarten doesn't mean you're perfect for each other now. So really looking through your relationships, what is a net positive and what is really taxing. And if it's your boss, it's harder, right? But saying no and really also doing a spring cleaning in your relationships and keeping the ones that really give you something back can also be very helpful, because constant psychological stress is also free radical bombs in your body. It looks very similar to chemical stress.
Right. There's a physiological negative reaction in your body to psychological stress. I think people should 100% understand
Exactly.
that as well. We're talking about cleaning up toxins. That's beautifully spoken there. All right, Elena, as we're kind of wrapping up here, I'm curious as to your personal opinion of the future of mankind in our health. So we are here in the States, we're fatter and sicker than ever, and we're getting fatter and sicker at an alarming rate in spite of just spending an astronomically ridiculous amount on healthcare, on our traditional healthcare. Do you see what is your outlook for the future? Is technology going to save us? So like you're out there on the kind of the cutting edge. Hey, I'm trying to make this brain food because there are these gaps in modern culture. Are you optimistic that someday technology is going to save us and we're all going to be healthy, or less so? I'm really curious as to your take on this as somebody in your position.
Yeah, no, I wish I would be more positive or be able to be more positive there. I think no product in the world can outdo a bad environment. And I'm just shocked to see how much, commercial interests always override political decisions to keep the water clean. And the problem is with all of these toxins that are out there, we have technology to get rid of heavy metals somewhat because they are charged. But every other like lipophilic toxins, there's so many. We don't have an antidote. We
Right.
don't have like a something like a magnet that helps us pull these out of our body and even our and pull these meaningfully out of the world, right? And it's very expensive. I think as if we as a grassroots don't demand our governments to really change how much pollutant, how much chemicals are going into the world, if this doesn't become more regulated, because commercial interests always win and there will be more glyphosate for yet another while because otherwise they don't make enough profit, whatever, it's going to look really grim on this planet.
Mm.
I think there needs to be drastic changes. We can try to ameliorate things to make it a bit better with things like a medical food or other things in the meantime, but you asked for the long outlook, right?
Mm-hmm.
The planet needs change. The planet needs change. And I don't think people in the positions of big companies that are depending on profits will be able to make those changes because they will be initially uncomfortable. But we know from small things like gardening, home gardens, right? People want more organic. The more people are demanding and really bringing their money to the companies that are adhering to the change, the more power we have. If it's a mass movement and really the economical resources flow to the ones that are doing good, I think then we have the power to change. And then at some point, maybe the government will follow. So that's really my hope for the future. I mean, my outlook isn't too good if things keep going like this. I don't think technology will advance as quickly as we are able to mess up the planet.
Mm,
At this stage, I really think we need to become enough people to really care and also think about the future and invest in the things that are protecting the planet and invest in organic and all these like food items that care, so that it becomes an economical force that creates the change, because change will only happen if there's profit from it.
yeah,
That's the sad truth,
that
right?
is.
So that would be my wish, that many, many people hear this, that many people are informed. I believe in empowering people. Most people, I don't think anybody in the US is willingly poisoning their bodies. You know, it's not like I wake up and give Kellogg's to my kids and think, oh, I'm really destroying their brain, right? It's
Right.
like, oh, this is what I saw on the advertisement. Everybody was healthy. They love it. I'm doing something good, you know?
Hmm.
And this is where we can make a difference. But Kevin, what's your outlook for the future?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that it starts with us. I think that my health, your health, and by you, I mean you, listener, it's our responsibility. We have to take responsibility for that. I am cautiously optimistically that we will get there. I don't think that the medical system or our government is responsible for our health, and I don't think they're going to affect change without, like you said, without us demanding it. So I do think it starts with grassroots. We tell our folks here all the time, look, shop local, go to a farmer's market. Look for, now here in the
Yes.
States at least, where we have a new designation for food, regenerative farming. It is
Oh, cool.
so there, if you can find
Yeah.
farmers who are doing regenerative, and look, if we support these small farmers, more money will go to them. Right now, here in the U.S., we
Exactly.
subsidize corn and soybean, and that's why there's high fructose corn syrup in everything, because it's practically free
Yeah.
for people that are adding
Exactly.
this to their foods. Whereas regenerative farming is not practically free. It's
Yeah. One more thing. I
sure.
mean, just 500 years back, people would spend 90% of their income on food, you know?
Mm,
And now think about how much money are you spending on your food today? And everybody's whining, but the organic eggs are too expensive. What too expensive compared to what, right? We pay a fortune for rent. Everybody, we have huge cars. In the US, people, families have two, three cars,
hmm.
right? Then we're like, oh, but my egg should only cost, I don't know, 50p. We need to also be prepared to spend more money again on the things that keep us healthy and not just our cars, right? Everybody's prepared to pay a huge amount on a car or whatever it is, right? Or your clothes. Or I think we also need to be prepared to pay more for high quality food, soap, you know, household items, and then just either buy less. Sometimes these things that last longer as well, but maybe also redistribute how we think about what is worth spending money on. And then, as you said, go to the farmer's market, make it an event, show your kids
Hmm.
what a cucumber plant looks like.
Yeah.
You know, where what does a cow look like? Like also appreciating the next generation needs to appreciate nature again, because what you love you will protect. So really showing your people what goes into your body, right? Where does it grow and so on. So I think we also have a responsibility to bring our kids back into the forest and onto the farms and in nature, and yeah, make an excursion with your family to the farmers market and look at where the food is coming from. And then there is hope, but it needs to be many of us,
Yeah.
much
Back to
much
that
more than we are.
that grassroots effort. Yeah, absolutely love it. Beautifully spoken. Thank you for sharing your thoughts there. All right, Elena, as we're wrapping up here, where do you want to send people if people are interested and want to connect with you, especially my folks out there that maybe are migraine sufferers or perhaps loved ones or family members are migraine sufferers? Where can people connect with you?
Yeah, so it's Dr. Elena Gross on all social media platforms. I have a website as well. So if you put .com behind this, you can find a website where there's free resources, white paper. I've written a book, so launch, like it's been sitting there for over 2 years, but finally it will launch this year. So if you want, you can also sign up on a waiting list. And for the brand, if you want any information on ketosis, ketone bodies as a potent brain fuel, or our medical foods, something between a supplement and a drug, researched, that's Brain Ritual, like the brain and a ritual, dailyritual.com. And we also have social media everywhere and customer service. So you can also email us as well. And that will also get to me if you have any question on my end. And yeah, so that's where people can find more information and hopefully for better brain health, right? So knowledge is key. You can only make informed decisions if you're actually informed. Otherwise, it's sometimes a bad decision.
Absolutely. All right, folks, I will put all of Elena's information, all her socials, her websites, all in the show notes. You guys can find that on whatever app you're listening to this on, or of course on our website. Elena, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, and certainly your passion for this subject. I really encourage you to keep up the great work out there.
Kevin, it's been a great discussion. Thank you so much for having me and helping spread the word.
Okay, that's our show for today, folks. If you are interested in learning how the Silver Edge Collective membership can help you feel lean, strong, and confident again, you can find a link to learn more in the show notes for this episode. You guys can find that on whatever app you're listening to this on, or head over to silveredgefitness.com/373. As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show in two important ways. The first is to tell a friend about this podcast and encourage them to give it a listen. The second is for you YouTube folks to click the like and subscribe buttons, and for you podcast folks to please give this podcast a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss any future episodes. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today, and until next time, stay strong.